Thanks for watching the Carolina Justice Report. I'm Rainey Romero with the lovely law firm. Stay tuned. Today we're talking all about the Gabby Petito case and how her family just filed a lawsuit against the Moab, Utah police. Welcome back. I am joined with attorneys Amy Lawrence and Sharde Crawford. How are you guys doing?
Hey, doing good.
Hi, good. So today there's a lot to unpack here because we haven't done a Carolina Justice Report just yet on Gabby Petito. So we have to give a little bit of background on her story. But then recently in the news, we just found out that her family just filed a lawsuit against the Moab Police Department in Utah. So first, let's give a little background on who Gabby is. So who's Gabby? Kind of what's a little bit of her story? Sharde, I'll start with you.
Gabby is a 20-year-old, I think she was like 22 years old, female who had been traveling across the country with her boyfriend. And at some point she went missing. Mm-hmm. She was found eventually in Wyoming, deceased, and the cause of death was manual strangulation. The boyfriend was later found in Florida, right, where he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Mm. So it was determined that Gabby has actually been a victim of domestic violence, and that there was an issue where in Utah, the fact that she was a victim was completely missed.
Yeah.
Due to the negligence of the Utah Police Department.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of us remember this story. So, I mean, we just hit the 1-year anniversary in June of this happening. And so it's just interesting kind of that it's been a year already for all of this. But first we found out that she was missing, right? So we kind of went on this journey with the poor families that she was missing. And so there was this hunt to find her. And then all these reports came out that her fiance, Brian Laundrie, could have been abusive. And then she was found dead. Then there was this manhunt for the boyfriend, fiance, Brian. And then, he was then later found dead as well. And there was, talks of his parents helping him flee and just a whole big mess. But I think, what is constantly said over and over is how Gabby was very much the victim in this, as far as being a victim of domestic violence and domestic abuse. And to your point, that a lot of that was very easily seen. And police, I think, even commented on the fact that she was showing signs of being a victim of domestic abuse. And so I think the family is kind of saying you should have caught this. Is that kind of how this works lawsuit wise?
Yes, essentially they're filing an action against the Utah Police Department saying that they missed signs. So apparently when witnesses originally made a call to the police, they stated that they saw her fiance slap her. Police stopped the vehicle. It was swerving in the lanes, right, had run over the curb. And when they spoke with Gabby, she did admit that there was a domestic violence type of issue that had happened. But in typical victim reaction, right, she stated that it was her fault, that she started the incident, and that he then slapped her in response to it. Mm. And so when police concluded the report, their conclusion was that it was a disorderly conduct issue, right, and not a domestic violence. And because of that, it didn't get the treatment that it should have received.
What are the rules with that? Like, what makes something disorderly conduct first?
Well, I mean, this was clearly domestic violence.
Right.
When the police arrived on scene, we've got a witness saying that they saw her be slapped. And, in these cases, and we see them all too often, and they break our hearts. Mm-hmm. We see women who are, not trying to buck the system and trying to be polite and not wanting to pay the heavier price if he goes to jail. And so it's these classic signs of, it was my fault, I hit him first, which are usually not the case. There's no wound on him. In the Gabby case, on the body cams, you see she had a scratch, bruising, all the classic signs of domestic violence. And we always have these people, in the what is the saying, like in in the box in the back, right? They always want to make these comments like, well, why didn't you speak up? If she was a victim, why didn't you speak up? But that's the psychology of it, right? Of domestic violence. This is a circle of violence, and this is why we have it. I mean, and this is what police officers are supposed to be trained in, to acknowledge and to spot and, you know, to do things. And Arizona had specific rules that you had to follow. So when you come up on a case like this, that you have to escalate it to this, and these are the things, and there has to be an analysis. And none of that was done. And I think, and we talked about this before, that, and we deal with this all the time, and particularly when I represent victims of domestic violence, you know, the police officer, instead of what we see is we see women who constantly just want the charge to be dismissed, right? Because they don't want to go home and get their ass beat, for lack of a better word. That there will be a price that is paid for doing this.
Or oftentimes too, you've been dating someone, you end up having children with each other, and so there's a relationship. And so when the government, when the state steps in and is attempting to prosecute it, they're stepping into this family structure. They're stepping into these relationships. And so a lot of times that is going to put a drain on it. And so as victims, they'll be like, it's far easier for me to just let this go because that's going to resolve custody. You know, it's easier for me to let it go because then we can figure out how we're going to do vacations, how Christmas is going to work.
Where I'm going to lay my head tonight.
Exactly. You know, if I have a place to lay my head, that I don't have to go to a shelter, that I have the breadwinner that's still going to be able to pay the bills. And so there's a lot that goes into it. And a lot of the victims end up requesting, even if charges are pressed, for the state to let it go and not prosecute it.
And so so what happens is we have these police officers, they get in their mind, well, they're just going to dismiss it anyway. And so they don't do that analysis, and they don't do that process, and they don't document it the way they're supposed to. And then we end up with women like Gabby who are dead. And there's got to be some kind of responsibility there.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's awesome that in Arizona you can sue the cops for, you know, not doing their job correctly, because in South Carolina, Utah.
That's okay.
Sorry, in Utah, it's Arizona. But in South Carolina, you don't have that luxury. So, you know, we have those kind of cases all the time where, we have a case here in South Carolina recently where a woman it was a domestic violence situation. She'd gotten away from him. He threatened to kill her. She was scared. Her family comes down, and her parents come down to stay with her, and he breaks in and kills the dad and shoots her. She's on a ventilator. And the police knew all these things and didn't do anything to stop it. And there's no civil remedy for that. I think it's just insane.
That is crazy.
Because this is what we know. This is what we know. If that case alone would be the thing that was the catapult to change things, then it would have already been changed, because we hear that story over and over and over. And you know, I had a federal judge once tell me, you know, Amy, I wanted to negotiate. If we're gonna, you know, negotiate and settle this case, then part of the deal is they have to change their policies. And she said, honey, they're not going to change. If they were, they'd already changed them. And she said the only thing that you can do to really incite change is to hit them where it hurts. And I can't put a police department in jail, but what I can do is I can hit them in the pocketbook and force them that they never want to have to write that check again. And so that's why I think that they were able to do that in Utah is amazing. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And what's even worse is it's not enough to just create the policies, right?
Right.
You can create the policy all day long, but if the individuals who are supposed to abide by the policies aren't following the policies, then you have these instances like Gabby, because according to my research, they were supposed to, when you find that there's some type of domestic violence incident, you're supposed to escalate that. It's not supposed to just remain with the police. You're supposed to send it up to a prosecutor for them to make a determination of whether or not charges are meant to be filed. But in this instance,
and this
they
we have prosecutors that are on call with their cell phone for these moments right here.
They have on-call schedules where all night long there is someone who's supposed to answer that phone at any time of the day to give police officers guidance.
Yeah.
So if in situations like this, you ignore what your witness has said, you ignore the injuries that are on that individual, the signs that this victim is truly presenting like a victim, and you classify it as disorderly conduct, and you don't send it up the channels for there to be an ultimate decision, you're not even abiding by your own policies.
Right.
So it's not just policies and procedures, it's actions to follow it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Preach it, right?
Yes.
No, I sound like somebody, mama.
Well, I'm curious how many states have this, versus don't, and I'm
Well, the
surprised
majority
to
of
hear we
states do,
don't.
and we have those systems in place because we know that this is what happens to
Right.
women, right?
Right.
So, I mean, we see, how many women have to die before we do the right thing and follow our own rules?
Yeah.
We know that this is what it looks like. This is what domestic violence looks like. We know that if you get it wrong, then somebody could die.
Well, and we've had discussions on the Carolina Justice Report before with you, Amy. So I think folks at this point know that you're very passionate about this, and you do a lot of work in the community to try and help situations like this.
Yeah.
With our local police department, and to make sure that they have proper training that they should be getting for domestic abuse situations.
I think especially in our community, I think that's the pushback from the police department is what gets me. It's like in our area, they don't really have any training beyond the criminal, the criminal justice academy on domestic violence and how to deal with that stuff. I've got a civil case right now where they didn't do any kind of analysis that's required under the law, and arrested the female when she was clearly the victim of some of the most horrific domestic violence ever. And it's the pushback that we see in these police departments, and it usually comes with cases where women are victims, and that's the part that
That's the scary
I
part.
want to burn it down
Yes.
and build it back, and it breaks my heart as as a woman. I think we all deserve better than that,
Yeah, definitely.
but you've got to have the support and the want of the police departments to want something better for women, and I don't think we're there. I think it sounds good as a soundbite, but I don't think that it's in practice.
And maybe it's because the individuals who are typically officers are men. Maybe it's an inability to place oneself in another's shoes, for you to really understand what a victim goes through. I don't know.
I think I think you've hit a nail on the head, and I say this all the time because I've gotten into literally knockdown dragouts, everything shoved me, headbutting a police officer, trying to get this through their head. That you can say, well, why didn't they just say it? Here's a great example, and this isn't domestic violence, but this is sexual assault. 15-year-old girl gets sexually assaulted with another friend in the room. She never yelled out for help. And he said, well, why didn't she just say anything? I said, you get to say that as a white man, right, with a gun on your hip, and no one's ever questioned you, ever. And that's the place of privilege that we talk about, is that men can't, not all men, and I don't mean to lump everybody, but the majority of men, it's very hard for them to put themselves in those shoes, to understand the power imbalance of men and women, that they might not have somewhere to lay their head at night, because their children will be taken because they're stay-at-home moms, or they make significantly less because they take up the rearing of the children. I mean, we go through, this is the circle of violence, and until we can get police officers the training and the empathy, it's just really hard, and we're gonna have. Gabby will not be the last.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she just won't, and
difficult.
that breaks my heart.
Yeah. Well, and we didn't say this, but the fiance, Brian, when he committed suicide and was found in Florida, he did have a journal that was found by his body that did confess to killing Gabby, which I think, I just want to mention that because that's an important part, that he did confess that he killed her. I just want to read a little bit of the actual lawsuit. This is with CBS News. Gabby Petito's family filed a lawsuit against police in Moab, Utah, accusing them of negligence that resulted in the 22-year-old's death. They're seeking $50 million in damages. The lawsuit, which was filed by her parents, and Nicole and Jim Schmidt, which I'm not sure who they are, but it was filed by both couples. They named the police department, 3 of its officers who responded, and 10 other unnamed defendants, and accuses them of negligent failure in their investigation. $50 million. What does that mean? I mean,
means nothing and it means everything.
Yeah.
It goes back to what that judge said. You've got to hit them where it hurts to incite the change. And the only way to do that, I can't go put those people in jail. I can't put a whole police department in jail. And the only thing that I can do is to hit them in the pocketbook to incite that change, right? To say that this can't happen again. It's sad that that the value of women is that Gabby Petito's life wasn't enough to say this is where this never happens again. That we have to go and sue somebody, and hopefully that if they have to write a check for $50 million, then that's going to be the thing that
sparks the change.
That sparks the change. Makes me cry.
On kind of a separate but the same topic, how does it work, with Brian, the fiance, with him dying in this, and he normally would have been charged, right? So when someone dies, what happens with that charge? Is it just there's no one to charge, or is there still some sort of case?
Everything stops. And
Everything
I think
stops.
that's probably a big part of this for that family is they want to know what happened.
Yeah.
And when Brian was found dead by his own hand, it stopped all investigation into what went wrong here. And so the only way to have that investigation is to have subpoena power. And that's why the civil suit is so important, because this is the only way we figure out what really happened and where the breakdown of everything was and how we can do it better.
Yeah.
And as a parent, I would be sitting here saying, because I have a daughter, and so this is very scary. But for those officers' actions, could my child have come home to me?
Yeah.
Oh.
If they had done just something different, if they had followed their own policies and procedures, would my daughter still be alive? Would I still be able to kiss her? Could I spend another Christmas with her? Could I see my grandchildren one day? Could I have one?
Yeah.
And that's the scary part, And so if it were my child, I would be ready to burn the world down.
Yeah.
And $50 million would not be enough. It never would be.
That Sharde, I mean, what a great representation of showing what a family with her parents are going through. I mean, all of those things that you think about that keep you up at night, that force you to keep fighting for this.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes total sense why they filed this lawsuit. They got no closure with Brian killing himself. They have that where it's like, here's all the signs. Why was nothing done? This could have been prevented. You could have saved her. That's a really tough pill to swallow.
It feels like she was drowning, and everybody was sitting there with a life jacket, and no one threw her the raft.
Yeah. Well, and in this lawsuit, they presented photos of her with bruises and the scratches and blood on her face and stuff from
all
when they
the
saw
body
her.
cams. Yeah.
And just tons of evidence showing why this was an obvious abuse.
All I can think about is you could have saved her.
Yeah.
You could have saved her, and we won't ever know.
Yeah.
And for that, they have to pay.
So good for the parents for doing this lawsuit.
Absolutely.
Why do you think it took a year to do? Is that part of some sort of protocol?
I think it takes time. It takes time to gather information.
It takes time, but I mean, they've got to mourn the death of their kid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The last thing you're thinking of is like, I want to burn it in that moment.
Yeah.
You just got to wrap your mind around the thought of like, she's not going to be here for Christmas, right?
Right.
There's no 24th birthday or whatever it is. It's like you've got to wrap your mind around that and like just kind of digest that before you can even process how to not have another. That because I think really for them, it has nothing to do with money. This has everything to do with like they don't want another mom and dad to feel like they
feel the same way. Yeah.
So it's using it to kind of create change, hopefully,
that's
in the system.
That's the great thing about being a lawyer. This is the great. It's the great part about being a lawyer. Like I can't go and do brain surgery on people. I can't fix people's lives in that way. But how we can touch other people's lives is that we go and we fight for the Gabbies, right? We file these lawsuits because it's not about the money. It's never about the money. It's always about like, I just don't want anybody else's parents to ever feel like that again. And if this is like the avenue we have to take to like force change, then, we're all in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally get it.
So at this point, this lawsuit was just filed, what happens next? What are the next steps here?
Well, so essentially, and Sharde informed me of this. He's way smarter than I will ever be. That Utah, they haven't essentially filed a lawsuit yet. They have filed a notice to get permission. So when you want to sue the government, they have to give you permission to sue them. And they have filed the notice to ask for permission to sue. And once
That's interesting.
so many days have to toll, it's like this in a lot of cases, or there has to be a hearing on it or whatever that might be, or they might consent to it. Once that is, the lawsuit will be filed and then they'll be served. And then that starts the discovery process. And I think for them, this is where really why they're doing what they're doing is like they want to know why and where was the failure of the system. Because this is what this is. It was a failure of a system. And the price that was paid was their child's life, right? And so it gives them subpoena power. They get to do depositions, send questions called interrogatories. These are all the things that get to happen to try to get to that answer of why and how. And where did this all go wrong and how can we fix it to make sure it doesn't ever happen again?
Well, and obviously, you know, we don't have all the details that are going to be brought out during the trial of this, but what would your, you know, guess be as far as what's going to happen with this?
My gut tells me that this will not be a trial,
Really?
No,
that this will be a settlement,
definitely.
and and it will be a big one.
Interesting. You agree, Sharde?
I do.
Wow.
Because this is the deal. This is an entity. This is a police department who can't afford for its people and its community not to have trust in it. And just the body cam alone tells us that they failed. When we see Gabby Petito's little face and her demeanor and what she says, these are all things that tell us that they failed, and they know it. And hopefully they fall on the sword and do the right thing, and then they incite the change that needs to happen to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And hopefully if that happens, then that will send the ripple effect through everywhere in the United States that this kind of shit is not going to be tolerated. Women are going to be protected, and we're going to do the right thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for chatting about this subject and for enlightening folks on kind of the laws and the differences and all that good stuff. So thank you. Folks, you know, stay with us. I mean, we are going to follow this as this goes to trial or not goes to trial. And feel free to comment, you know, on the video. We love to interact with viewers as they kind of comment and answer any questions you may have. Thanks so much for watching the Carolina Justice Report. We release new episodes every Tuesday at 2 p.m. And you can find us anywhere that you consume your media: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. You can visit us online at justiceislovely.com. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
When life gets ugly, justice is love.